Hello there, people of the internet. How's everyone doing today? I'm doing alright, thanks for asking. I got asked a question the other day, and the question was, do I prefer aperture sights versus the standard leaf sights on a rifle, or which one of these different kinds of sights do I prefer? This is a valid question. Both sights have a lot of pros and cons, I guess you would say. But a lot of it has to do with how the sights are made, who made them, the ranges of these sights and whatnot. There's a lot of different factors between just aperture sights and your standard, leaf iron sights. And I figured I'd go ahead and make a video talking about some of the pros and cons between these. If you don't know what types of sights I'm talking about, I made a video specifically on the different kinds of rifle sights you're going to come across. Go ahead and check the description down below. You will find a link to that video. But I think one of the biggest factors with each kind of sight is the range that the rifle is sighted in for versus what your target is. For example, what I have out here to represent my aperture sight is my little jungle carbine here. Your Enfield rifles are very, very commonly known to have aperture sights on them, which is why I chose this one. Not only that, but I got ammo to actually shoot this thing. This battle sight right here is only sighted in for 300 meters or yards. I believe it's meters, but it might be yards. Well, I can't see anything past about 100 yards, so I normally do all of my shooting at about 50. As a result, with this being sighted in for 300, I have to aim at the dirt under my target in order to make hits on target. As a result of me having to aim so far down, oftentimes my target is covered by the top piece of metal on this aperture sight. So, depending on the range that you're firing at, you may not even see your target with your aperture sight, which does make making hits on target a little bit more difficult, which is kind of what you are wanting to do if you're shooting a rifle. The aperture sight is also, it requires a little bit more training and finesse to be able to make hits out at any real distance. Whenever you give someone, a rifle that has a standard leaf sight on it, you just tell them to line the front sight up with the rear sight. But with an aperture, you have to figure out the sweet spot. Normally it's in the middle, like 99.9% of the time, it's in the middle of that aperture. And lining that aperture up with your front sight might sound easy to people who are well experienced shooters, but you give the gun to somebody who has never fired a gun, or conscripts, or etc., and they might have a little bit more difficulty learning how to fire that thing effectively versus just a standard leaf sight rifle. Now, the leaf sight rifle does also have its issues. If the V-notch on the back of the leaf is too small, then it can impede your accuracy with your front sight, because you might not be able to see your front sight, at least not all that effectively. With the aperture, you're looking through a hole and you can see your front sight very, very effectively, so you don't have to worry about the lack of accuracy whenever you learn where to hold that front sight inside of that aperture. Oh, Nelly, that wind is a little on the chilly side. I wish that the sun was a little more in that direction so I wasn't standing in the shade. So if you are firing out at greater distances and you know how to properly use an aperture sight, that would probably be the way to go. But if you're up close and personal, a leaf sight would probably be the way to go. Assuming, of course, that your battle 0 is like 300 yards. If your battle 0 is like 50 yards, then you can use either or. Now, the leaf sight does also have its downsides. If you're lining up your targets, or lining up your sights on targets, and your front sight is lined up with the wings of the rear sight, that rear sight is going to block a lot of your peripheral vision, so you can't necessarily see everything going on the sides of that target. Not a big issue at all, unless you're like on the battlefield and there's a lot going on and you got to pay attention to every little thing. But even then, it's still not that big of a deal. For both these sights, I'm doing like extreme nitpicking here. So don't go thinking that this is like to the extremes. Like for the aperture sight, it's not that big of a deal to aim a little bit lower since it's sighted out to 300 yards. For the leaf sight, it's not that big of a deal to not be able to see everything going on each side of the target. But you do have a better time seeing what's going on each side of the target with the aperture sight until you get to the point to where you are blocked by the other ends of that aperture sight, like the side ends, I guess you would call it. But you still have a lot more visibility until you reach that metal blocking your vision than you would with a leaf sight. So these are pretty much all of the pros and cons that I've managed to come up with just based on my experience with what I've seen while firing these rifles. As far as actually picking one and deciding which one I like better, originally it was the leaf sight, but as I got better with the aperture sights, I'm leaning more towards them. Finding your front sight can be more difficult whenever you're looking through an aperture sight, but just through repeated practice, I've gotten very good at it. So if you are lesser experienced, a leaf sight's probably the way to go. So yeah, as of right now, I'd say I probably prefer the aperture simply because I have a much clearer front sight. And I need all the visibility that I can get because I'm blind. Well, not like blind, but I can't see very well at all. Alright, now comes the fun part. We're going to lob some lead down range. I'm going to walk out to a distance. I've got both a leaf sight rifle and an aperture sight rifle. We're just going to lob some lead down here at the car from about 100 yards or so, which is pretty much my maximum distance for being able to see. Anything past that, and I'm basically just shooting in the wind. Speaking of wind, over there you might have some more wind noise. Right here, this tree I got my camera on kind of blocks it. Over there, it doesn't do it so well, so I apologize for any wind noise. Alright, this video is an excellent excuse for me to fire some of my favorite rifles. First up is my little jungle carbine here. This is just a Santa Fe reproduction, or Santa Fe look-alike, made back in the 1960s off of a 1942 number 4 Mark 1 star, or nope, this is a number 1 Mark 3. So okay, take that for what you will. These right here are very inexpensive rifles, unlike the actual jungle carbines, so I don't feel bad about taking this thing out and having fun with it. Speaking of having fun with this rifle, let's go ahead, lob some lead down range. Now, I've only got 5 rounds in this thing, which is all we need to show off shooting this aperture sight. And since we are at a little bit more of a distance, I don't have to aim as low. Although, I probably have to aim lower than that. Damn, I guess I have to aim even lower than that. Alright, let's try it again. This time I'll aim quite significantly lower. There we go. Man, I underestimated how low I'd have to aim for this thing. Alright, well, I can't even see my target at this point. But I am making shots. I hear it pinging in the distance. I think I pulled that one a little left. Oh well. That's the issue with aperture sights. If you're sighted out for longer distances than what you're firing at, you might not necessarily see your target. Alright, up next is my Mosin Nagant. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I normally say Nagant, but people don't seem to like that. My Mosin Nagant. Got some wind coming through now. This one right here has obviously been sporterized and had some custom work done to it. This is a Chinese Type 53 from 1955, I believe that says. Can't quite read it, but I believe that's 1955. It's a pretty wore out rifle, but the trigger job that was done in this thing is immaculate. And as you can see, we have just a standard leaf sight on it versus the aperture sight. Alright, let's go ahead and lob some lead down range. Been a little while since I shot this thing. As a matter of fact, there's some dust on it right here. There you go, much better. Alright, I remember this thing having quite a lot of concussive blast. Yep, That's quite a lot of concussive blast, all right. And I think I fired low. I'm not sure where I'm firing with this thing. All right, I see it. I got to fire a little lower. All right, yeah, I got it now. These Mosins fire a little high, so you got to kind of compensate by aiming a little bit lower. All right, made our last rounds on target. Man, this thing is an absolute hand cannon. Every time I fire it, I feel the teeth rattle around in my skull. All right, well, like I said, each of these rifles has pros and cons with their sight. I prefer aperture sight, but I prefer aperture sights that are sighted out for about 100 yards. Easier to make hits on target. I say that because my AR-15, whenever I take the sight mount off of it, I have a carry handle with it that has an aperture sight on it. So I really like that. I really enjoy that. Alright, well, thanks for watching, guys. If you like this stuff, subscribe to the channel, because as you can see from the car down there, I do this kind of stuff all the time. If you like the video, do me a solid and actually like the video. YouTube's anti-gun right now, so every like, every subscription, every share definitely helps. Check out the description down below. You're going to find a link to that other video and like social medias and Patreon, Discord. My second channel where I get drunk and play video games. Besides that, I'm just going to say, hey guys, thanks for watching. Go off, have a fantastic day, and let me know if you want to see anything else. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. Shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.